What's going on, guys? This is episode 2 of making this knife here, and you can see that I've changed the guard. It was a little wonky and curled, so I took it back off, straightened it, put it back on there, and then kind of hammered it so that it holds itself in place until the epoxy and the handles are put on. So today we're going to be using these purple heartwood scales and clamping them and pinning them into place like this and leaving them to dry, and then coming back and sanding the handle. Okay guys, so this is what we're going to be using today. We got our purple heartwood scales, we have our brass pins that I just cut, we have the epoxy and the boiled linseed oil for after we sand the scales down. We have our drill to drill the holes through, and our belt sander here, good old trusty Harbor Freight edition, to do the sanding. I may do some flat disc sanding as well if that's not fast enough, but I wanted to show you guys here that I've got a hardness test here, and this is HRC 65 hardness. It's as hard as the test goes, and this knife escapes it just fine. You can just hear how it glides over it. And you can see I can go softer. This is HRC 60. You know, so it's definitely hard. So we did a good job on the quench. So let us move on to some handle making here, and we'll mark these scales and we'll drill the holes and set the brass and get it all glued up here. Alright, so I just want to bump these up to the hilt, and that's part of the frame and the structure that holds the hilt in place. It can't go past the blade because of the design here, because the hole isn't large enough, and it can't slip down because of the handles, or the handle. So let's see here, we'll put this little bad spot that I've cut out down here at the bottom. So it's going to look something like that, and then we'll put the pins in, but now let me mark it here so I know where to drill. Okay, and now I want to flip it and drill and mark this one.
Mommy, this was the last meatball pizza.
This knife is a lot of firsts for me. It's the first knife I've made with handle scales, and the first knife I've made with a hilt, and it's my first Bowie kind of style knife too. So anyways, I'm gonna try to get these close. I have some wiggle room on the edges to mess with if I need to readjust where the holes are or make them bigger, and a little slop is okay because the epoxy is going to join it all together really hard. But you want to match the pin size with your drill size, maybe a smidge smaller, because if you go too small with your drill size and you try to drive your pin in, it's going to split your wood. So let's drill the holes and do a dry fit test here. This stuff is very hard. Okay, you can see here it's going to fit. It just needs a little bit of hammering to go all the way through. So we're going to do the other holes in both of these, and then we'll put the brass pins in. Alright guys, so we got the drills, or the holes drilled, and now I'm putting the pins in for a dry test fit before we try to epoxy this thing. So let me see here. Okay, we got one through. So now okay. Looks like it's lined up pretty well. Let's see here. Might have to move that one a bit. It's not wanting to go through. There we go. Just had to move it some. Okay, that one's through. And then the next one, just make sure it's lined up. And there it is. Alright. That's a really tight fit, even before the epoxy. Don't seem to be going anywhere, so I'm going to just kind of hold this one up and make sure that the holes line up with these, and then we can go ahead with the epoxy, I believe. Okay, I think I need to make that middle one a little bit bigger. Alright, so let's take this back apart, put some epoxy on it, and then we'll put it all together. Alright, so we're going to do the epoxy mix up here, and we're going to apply it to the handle scales, and then put our pins in, put some clamps on it. You want to get this good and mixed up here. That's what activates it. Alright. So I'm just going to take this thing here and just start kind of adding it that way. I should be wearing gloves. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Alright, that's enough on that one. It was such a tight fit even without epoxy that I'm not really super worried about any kind of glue failures or anything like that, because you know they used to do knives this way before epoxy was even a thing. So alright, let's get this set in the knife. Okay. And now we need to attach this side. Alright guys, after a stressful 15 minutes or so there, we've got it all clamped. We got 2 pins all the way through, but the 3rd pin we could not get to go through the 2nd scale, so I'm going to have to drive a secondary pin from this side just to complete the look. But it's got the epoxy, it's got 2 full pins in it, and the little bit that we missed here on the handle can be grinded back, and we'll get it looking uniform. So now we wait 30 minutes to an hour, it said, for this stuff to be handleable, and 24 hours for it to fully set, and then we'll sand it all down and see what we got. Alright guys, so hindsight's 20/20, and these are the mistakes that were made on this handle. So as you can see, the metal of the tang is showing there. We're gonna have to grind it back, and what happened was one of these scales I flipped. I glued the wrong side, so I had to make it fit. So I was like bending it and pushing it and trying to make these pins slide all the way through, and I got the top two. They're true, they go all the way through. This one went through the tang, but it hit the other side of this scale and began to bend as I hammered it. So the epoxy was setting, I was running out of time. That's as good as that one got. So I had to put a pin in on this side, a false pin, to complete the look. The pins on this side and this side on the bottom are going to be slightly in different positions, but that's as good as I could do, seeing how it was covered in epoxy and it was already setting. So we're going to sand it down and see what we can do about this handle. It's going to be a bit slimmer than I originally thought because of this mistake here, but we're going to try to trim it up and make it nice still, and see what we can do. First I need to zip off these pins with a grinder, and then I need to use a flap disc or my belt sander here and get this worked down and put a nice profile on that handle. So as we can see, you can see where the dot is on that side versus that side. They're slightly offset, and to the eye it just looks like the pen went in crooked, but that's really all I could do with this. Like I said, this knife was a lot of firsts for me. First time using handle scales and pins, first time with a guard that I keep calling a hilt, and first Bowie style knife that I made, and I've never used 1095 steel either. I've just, the only knives I've made really are out of high carbon railroad spikes up until now. So I'm still learning, and we're still going to try to make something cool out of this. But got a lot of material of this really hard purple heartwood to remove right here, and a lot of material off the back right here to remove. There's a good probably 3/4 of an inch to take off there, but once we get it all cut down, we'll get a better idea of what it's going to look like. Okay, so it looks like that's going to be way too slow for us. This is going to be just to finish it up at the end. We're going to have to switch to the grinder and the flap disc. So we switch to a flap disc, and we'll see how that removes the material.
Okay, so as you can see, this is after and this is before. We're going for that to be even with the tang all the way around smoothly, and then we're gonna round the handle out, put a little groove here for the finger to set in. It's already more comfortable to hold with all that removal there. I used a chop saw to cut that end off that was sticking out really far to eliminate a lot of the sanding work. We still got to remove some of the tang here. It's sticking beyond the point of the handle, and then back here a tiny bit, and then all this back here. So we're going to get on that and then get on to the next steps here. Alright guys, so this is what we got so far. You see we still have a little material to take off here. And it's already feeling really good in the hand. Our hilt is rock solid, it's not going anywhere. Nice and thin, but not too thin. I've got a little bit of cleaning of the blade to do after this is all done. It's got some sand disc marks in it and whatnot. I'll try to minimize that. I don't have any kind of buffing equipment, so it's not going to be like a mirror finish, but it's going to be like a glossy, semi-gloss finish. But this wood is very interesting. This is what it does to a flat disc. It like cakes in there. It's like this powder, you can see it in that crack, the dust, and it's like really pungent, I'll put it that way, and it's a hard wood, so like it grinds very difficult, but we're getting there, and I am using a combination of the disc, the flat discs and the belt sander. And we'll be getting down to the metal in no time here. There's a few flaws. There's a little space there where I didn't use enough clamps. I should have used a third clamp down here, but that's okay. It looks like that it's not on this side. It's just kind of tilted up in the back. It could have just done that when I clamped this side and it made that side rear out. But and there's a few flaws in the guard, like the line here, a few little things like that. But you know, this is my first attempt at one of these kind of knives, and that's how you learn. You just do it. So we're gonna finish this up here and start forming the edges, the curves, and the little groove of the finger here. And we'll put some linseed oil on it, see how it looks. Alright guys, so we got this all the way ground down, all the way around, looking pretty good. I've got a few little spaces in between the scale and the handle here. I can go back and put some epoxy in that later, and then sand it down real quick. But that's the basic outer profile of the blade, or of the handle. It's a little more boxy and sharp looking than it will be, but it's got to lose some girth. And we're going to put a little finger groove right here, probably up here, messing with this. But so hopefully just belt sander work is what's left. So you can kind of see here that I'm putting a little cutaway for the hand to rest comfortably and to have a setting place for that first finger. I'm trying to get it a little bit more of this girth taken out because it still feels kind of fat in the hand, but it's a large knife, so I don't want to make it a skinny little toothpick handle. So it's not going to be much more thin than this, but I'm trying to round the bottom out pretty well and evenly, take off those square edges, and we want it to profile nicely, which means when you grab the knife, you don't want to grab it and have the feeling that you can't get a good edge alignment because the handle is too round. It just wants to spin. When you grab a knife, you want it to remain straight and true, and to have a good feel in the hand to align the blade correctly. So I don't want to get rid of all of the edges. I don't want to make it a perfect circle. I'm going for more of like an oval shape. So I need to lose some of the sides here. Alright guys, so this is as close as I care to get it with a flat disc, and the color is beautiful. The purple is really popping. It's got pretty good handle to blade balance. It's like right above the hilt, right there. That's not too bad at all. So I don't want to remove any more material than I have to now. There's some repairs. I have to go back with some little bit of epoxy mixed with some of this purple sawdust to fill these holes. We have some here, and let's see, a couple places here and here where the wood moved around when I clamped it. But you can see we still have that ovalish kind of design, not too boxy. It profiles well, and I'm going to do some hand sanding to this after the epoxy sets up good enough down in those cracks. And then when I hand sand it, finalize it, I'll hit it with some linseed oil to protect it and give it a shine, and then this knife will be done.
Alright guys, so I did some light sanding on this just to see what the true final color might kind of look like. And it's like a mix of reddish wood color in there with some dark purple and almost black in some places. But these are the cracks that we're going to address. This big one all the way down to about right there, and then this one here. And there's a tiny one there where the epoxy didn't quite squish out enough. So as you can see right here, we've got our purple sawdust from this wood, and we're going to use a little bit of epoxy and mix it all in there together, and use a piece of cardboard and a toothpick to work it into these cracks, let it dry, and then we'll sand it back. This might make it completely black looking, actually. I want quite a bit of sawdust in it, that way it kind of looks like wood when I sand it back. So there we have a pretty good mixture, and it'll sand back, so I'm not too concerned about being real super neat with it. I just want to make sure that it is forced down in there, that way when I sand it that it doesn't just pop back out. Okay, let me give it a once over here. Make sure that the cracks are filled. I'm gonna probably leave this one up here bulging out a little because it keeps wanting to sink in when I scrape it back, so we'll just leave that little build up there. And the other ones look pretty good. I'll just leave them bulged out a little here. And a close look here. There's a little spot right there. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry for a while and I'll come back and sand that back. Alright guys, so this is set up pretty well. It's been like 3 or 4 hours, and I've started sanding it just to make sure that it wasn't too gummy to sand. So I'm gonna sand this back and see how it looks. So a little hand sanding here. Some kind of ran over and spilled onto the other parts that didn't need it to be on there, so we got to kind of sand those off too. But yeah, it'll take a little bit, so we'll get back to you when that's finished. Alright guys, so we sanded all the epoxy off. We successfully filled in all the gaps. Everything's looking good. I still have to clean up a few little spots here, a little stuck epoxy in some of the sanding lines, and then we're going to cover the handle with linseed oil and I'm going to touch up the blade a little bit. It's got some scratches and whatnot from doing all this other work, and refine the tip just a tiny bit. It's a little rounded, and then it will be finished. So let's put some oil on it. Alright guys, so we got our boiled linseed oil here, and this is when we're really going to see what the handle's truly going to look like. It brings out the colors in the wood, it protects it, so we're going to see what that's all about now. So let's get this out on a rag here. Nice and heavy. That way we can let it soak in for 20 minutes or so. Very, very pretty wood. And there we go. We got to let that dry and put a few more coats on, but it doesn't change how it looks that much, the more coats you put on it. So that's basically the finished look there. So there's the knife complete. I just have to do some finishing sharpening on it, and we'll do the cutting tests and all that on the final video, alongside of doing the sheath. We'll just go ahead and do that. That way it's at the very end when we do all the testing and stuff on it. So there's the knife, pretty much done. We got our hammer marks up here that we put in. We got our guard, our purple heartwood handle, our brass pins. It's full tang, forged in distill taper. And it's got a convex grind done by hand. Well, by disc sander. By hand, I mean that it's a hand tool. I didn't do it on a belt grinder using any kind of jig, I should say. Yeah, there it is. Thank you guys for watching.